Hi everybody, in this video I want to show you how you can implement a scheduled feed in your broiler flocks, and I want to show you just why you want to implement a feeding schedule and the benefits of it. Now firstly, if you go to an average small farmer and you ask them whether you should feed on a schedule or whether you should feed on an ad lib basis, keeping them in feed 24/7, they would most likely advise you to feed ad lib. And the reason they do this is because there's a common belief that with large producers that do 90,000 in a shed, that in fact they feed them on this basis and they keep them in food 24/7. But the reality is they actually don't do this. And they don't do this because they've realized that feeding ad lib is very bad for the health of the chicken. And generally when something is very bad for the health and well-being of an animal, it's also bad for your business. Now, why it's bad for your chicken is because if you feed them ad lib, you could very easily and very plausibly get a 2 kilogram chicken in 4 weeks. Now, although that might seem like a good idea, there's going to be a lot of health aspects relating to this. So you're going to wind up with chickens that can't move. They're going to be reduced mobility. They're going to spend a large portion of their life sleeping on their stomachs. Their legs won't develop properly. They're going to have a lot of injuries on their backs because of the weight they're carrying. And on top of that, you're going to have sudden death syndrome, where they will have a seemingly healthy chicken will have a heart attack. And not only will I be losing my day-old chick, which is R10.50, I'm also going to be writing off the 4 kilograms or 5 kilograms of food that they ate to get to that weight. So from a business point of view, that's also a very bad idea. Now, the large producers, they've known this for years. And so what they've done is they've implemented a very expensive, sophisticated computer that is able to actually calculate the quota of food which they require the shed to eat. And the computer will actually weigh this quantity of food as it comes through. Then when the computer picks up that they've eaten their daily quota, they will want to limit overfeeding. And the computer does this by turning off probably about 60% of the lighting in the shed. Now, with the dim lighting, you're going to find that your chickens are going to want to sleep, and if they sleep, they are not going to be eating. And so that's how they implement their feeding schedule on such a large scale. Now, in my case, I don't have an expensive computer system. What I did do is I developed an app, which with my help does exactly the same thing. And the app's name is the Broiler Farming Guide, and it's available on the Play Store for free. You can download it. And I've got the app open in front of me here. And just a quick tour of the main screen. On the top right hand corner over there, you can see the menu. And that will go to your settings where we will set up our pricing on our food. To the left of that, we have our weekly food budget. And here the computer will give me a weekly breakdown of my production. So it will break it down into cycles of 1 week from Monday to Sunday, or if we're in the current week, it'll be the current week to Sunday. And it will show me exactly how much food and how much of each type of food each of my flocks are going to be needing. And it will then add it together, and it will tell me how much food I need to buy on a Monday in order to see them through to the Sunday. Okay, but we'll come back to that in a minute when we do the food calculation. On the main screen, your screen will be blank because you don't have a batch yet. But you'll see for each batch that you do create, as I've got there a batch called Brooder, it displays it as a little block, and it will give me the outputs of this particular batch. So it shows me a preview photo of the batch. That's roughly what they should be looking at. And there I've got the quantity of 96. My mortality rate is 4%. Currently my sales percentage is 0 because I haven't sold anything yet. There you can see that the age of these chickens is 3 weeks and 5 days. And it shows me a ration or a quota of food for the day of 12.48 kilograms of grower. So much like the large producer's computer will do, it gives me exactly the same calculation. Underneath that, we've got the costing for the batch. So on average, my cost per chicken is 27 Rand 97 cents. Next to that is more meaningful, is my cost per kilogram, which is 23 Rand and 31 cents per kilogram. And I'm going to be using this when I do my sales price. I'm going to be using my cost per kilo to determine my sales price per kilo, because later on I'm going to show you why you should be selling per kilogram and not based on what they call a stock price. Underneath that we have the feed performance value, and the feed performance value basically is the ratio of chicken feed to chicken weight gain. So right now in this hypothetical batch, my feed conversion is 1.3, and that means that for every 1.3 kilograms of feed that my chickens are eating, my chickens should gain 1 kilogram of body weight. Okay, so obviously that impacts directly on my costing. So if my feed performance was to go up, perhaps 2, it means that for every kilogram of weight gain that I get, I'm having to use 2 kilograms of food. So to keep our costs down, we're going to want to keep the feed performance value down as well. But fortunately, they've also provided us with all sorts of information about what normal feed performance is. But I'm going to show you a bit later exactly how you can use the feed performance value to work out the costing. And you can then look at your own numbers and you can determine what is acceptable for your situation and your market. But before we do that, I'm going to kill 2 birds with 1 stone here. And I'm going to show you how to create a batch, and I'm going to show you how to use your feed budget. So to create a batch, I'm going to click on the plus icon on the bottom right hand corner. And when I do that, it'll open up the create batch screen. There it asks for a date. So what it's asking for is it's asking for essentially the hatch date. And it will use this date to determine the age of my flock. And the age will then be used to determine just how much food they need, and it'll also determine what type of performance or what weight gain I would expect at this particular time. Now, in my case, I hatch my own day-old broiler chickens, so by default it'll be the 27th, which is today, the Sunday 27th. But if you're buying your day-old chicks in, there's a very good chance that your chicks would most likely have hatched last week. And they would have most likely spent the week vaccinating, feeding, waiting for a market. So you need to find from your hatchery exactly when the chicks hatched. So if your chicks hatched on Wednesday last week, you can select 23rd of April, and that will be your hatch date. Now, in my case, for this example, I want to show you a post-dated batch. In other words, I have a batch called Broiler. I have 96 chickens. And I'm considering increasing my quantity by 300. And I'm going to do that next week, Friday. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick a future date on the 2nd of May. And that will be when I get the batch. I'm going to then supply a title. You can supply any title you like for your batch. It's just for you to know which batch it is. And so I'm going to come here and I'm going to call it maybe 1. And I'm going to call it maybe 1. Because I'm going to see what impact that has on my cash flow. And if I cannot make money or I wind up with a cash flow problem, I'm going to change my mind and I'm not going to bring those chicks in. Under quantity, I'm going to tell it how many chicks I'm going to be bringing in. So I'm getting a bit more bold, and so I'm going to increase my quantity to 200 in that batch. It then wants to know what my cost for those chickens will be. So 200 chickens. That will cost me 2,100 Rand. And I will then minimize my keyboard. And once I've supplied the information, I will then click on the Add New Batch button to create the batch. So after I do that, it goes back to the main screen, my scoreboard. And you'll see now there are 2 blocks. One is called Broiler. The other batch is called Maybe 1. You'll see that the age of Maybe 1 is now negative because I don't have them. And the rest of the statistics really are meaningless because we haven't actually got the chicks, nor have we done any feeding on them. But what I want to do now is I want to see what my impact will be on my weekly feed batch, my weekly feed requirement. So to do that, I'm going to click on the food calculator or the food budget, and you'll see there on the top it gives me a summary of what I need. And it says from the Sunday the 27th through to Sunday the 27th. So as I said to you, it works on a weekly basis, and today is Sunday. So by default, it's going to show me the rest of this week. And all I need here today is 12.48 kilograms of food at a cost of 118 Rand. You'll see that it also gives me a breakdown of how that food is going to be allocated to my batches. You'll see my grower is 12.48 kilograms, and maybe one is 0 because I'm only getting them next week. Now, if I want to see what the impact next week will be, I can click on the next button, and it now shows me the window from the 28th of April through to the 4th of May. And again, you're going to see a total there of 9.2 kilograms of starter at 87 Rand 40. I'm going to need to buy 100.42 kilograms of grower at a cost of 953. And in total, I'm going to be looking at spending a minimum of 1,040 Rand just to buy food to feed my 2 batches up until Sunday next week. And again, if you look in the batches, it also shows you how much of each type of food is going to go to each batch. And it also shows me how old my chickens will be during that window period. So you'll see there that my brooder will be 3 weeks and 6 days. And so you can then try and judge perhaps maybe if a batch is coming up on 6 weeks, that it may offer you some relief, that you'd be able to sell that batch and be able to spend that money on further chicken food. And then just to fast forward one more time, I'm going to click the next button again, and you can see again it's got the starter, the grower, and the finisher, and my food cost for that week following will be 1,500. And then obviously as I go again, my food bill goes to 2,087, and fortunately, as I said to you, my brooder batch would be saleable. It's 5 weeks and 6 days, so that might be some relief, but I'm still going to have to feed maybe one. But if at any point in time the particular predicament doesn't look good and you don't think you're going to be able to get money from a batch, nor will you be able to actually afford this, my advice to you would be not to get maybe one and rather wait a while and finish the batches you have so that you avoid a cash flow problem. So that's the food budget. So I'm going to click close. Now we go back to the main screen. If you don't want to carry on with the batch, maybe one might have been a mistake. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to delete maybe one by long pressing on maybe one. And I'm going to then confirm the delete by clicking yes. And we go back to the main screen. Now, as I mentioned to you earlier, we have the output values in each of the batches. As I said to you, you can see the ration there is 12.48 kilograms. Now, why we need to feed on a ration is because what you're going to find happen if you overfeed the chickens, it actually makes the digestion a lot less efficient. So if you take a look at the feces of a chicken which is being overfed, you can actually visibly identify the chicken food in the feces as being undigested. And that food that you're seeing passing right through is money that you're spending, but production that you're not receiving. And so as I said to you, if you're feeding on an ad lib basis, on a continual basis, your wastage is going to be higher. And the amount of food that they're going to eat to gain 2 kilos of weight is going to be much higher than if you feed them on a food ration. And if you feed them on a food ration, it gives the body time to digest, it gives the body time to absorb, and it gives the body time to grow. And so you don't have as much wastage. Now, I can think of quite a few advantages of feeding on a ration other than your feed efficiency. Firstly, underfeeding your chickens or having your chickens underfed is as real a problem as overfeeding. So if your shed is too hot or your shed is too cold, you're going to find that your chickens are not going to be eating the required food amount. Now, if you're going to feed ad lib, let's say, for example, you put in 150 kilograms of food. That is an exorbitant amount of food. So whether or not your chickens are eating, overeating or undereating, there will always be food left over in the morning. Now, the problem with that comes in, if your chickens are too hot or too cold, and let's say, for example, they're only eating 6 kilograms of food, you would have no way of knowing because it doesn't matter whether they eat their ration or not. There will always be food left over. Whereas with the food quota, I'm going to be giving them 12.48 kilograms of food, and I am expecting the food to be finished by tomorrow morning. If I come to my broiler house in the morning and there's still food left over, or a significant amount of food left over, that would indicate to me that I have a problem. And then I need to investigate just as to why they're not eating that food quantity. On the other hand, having the food run out in the morning is actually not a bad idea. The reason for that is because when I weigh them, I'm going to be getting an empty crop weight. In other words, I'm going to be getting a weight of the chicken without a significant amount of food and water in the crop. Because a lot of times what would happen to me in the past is I would weigh my chickens in the morning and I would see them weigh maybe 2.6 kilograms. And you might think that they weigh 2.6 kilograms and that it would be a good idea to maybe slaughter them. And when you do a slaughter on the chicken, they come out weighing 1.3 kilograms. And the reason is because most of the weight that you saw on the 2.6 was actually undigested food in the crop. Because the crop was full of food, the intestine was full of food, but that's not going to actually turn me over money until it becomes chicken meat. Now, if I do this in the morning on an empty crop, I'm going to have a much more realistic picture of exactly how my chickens are growing. Now, in addition to that, every morning I need to know what my feed performance value is. Because if my feed performance value is high, that would be an indication to me that I have a problem and that I need to investigate the problem and solve it. Now, in order to do that, I need to know exactly how much food they've eaten, and I need to know how much weight they gained as a result of that food. And so by feeding on a ration, it creates a checkpoint scenario where I can actually do that every morning. Now, underneath that, you can see my feed performance value. And I mentioned that the feed performance value is actually quite important. And I want to show you how you can use that to actually determine whether or not you're on the right track or not. So what I'm going to do for you is I'm going to do a simple calculation here. I'm going to assume that my chickens are going to grow up into 6 weeks. And in 6 weeks, they're going to weigh 2 kilograms. Now, as you can see there, my current feed performance value is 1.3. Now, I'm going to, for the sake of an example, assume that my performance stays at 1.3 and carries on like that right through to 2 kilograms. But that's not correct, because you're going to see that as your chickens become bigger, they're going to be using a lot more food in order to stay warm and to move because they have larger bodies. And so that 1.3 or 2 kilograms would most likely be closer to maybe 1.8 or even 2. But just to illustrate early problem detection, if I cannot get this equation I'm going to show you to work at 1.3 feed conversion, the scenario is only going to get worse. So either I'm paying too much for my food, or my food efficiency is too low, or there is one or other problem that I need to take care of, because if at the moment my scenario is not looking good, it's only going to get worse. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how I can use that feed performance value to sort of extrapolate a cost per chicken. So if my body weight is 2 kilograms and my feed performance is 1.3, then the total amount of kilograms of food that I need can be calculated by taking the 2 kilogram body weight, and I'm going to multiply that by a feed performance of 1.3. Now, if I want to know how much that's going to cost me in terms of feed, I'm going to multiply that by my cost per kilogram of feed, which is R9.50. And that would give me my total food cost that would be involved in raising a chicken from day old up until 2 kilograms, assuming a feed conversion of 1.3. So I'm going to take my calculator now, and I'm going to multiply those three together, and you are going to see that my cost per chicken, or my cost for the feed, is going to be 24.70. Okay, so my feed bill will be 24.70. Now, what other expenses do I have in raising a chicken? A major cost is my day old chick cost, and that will add on another 10.50. On top of that, I've got labor. Okay, so now obviously, like I say to you, your situation might be different, but I'm going to assume my labor cost is going to be 6 Rand per chicken, and I'm going to then work on a heating cost and lighting cost of a further 6 Rand. Okay, so if I now wanted to extrapolate roughly what it would cost me to raise a 2 kilogram chicken, obviously there's more expenses involved in this, but I'm keeping it simple. So 24 Rand 70. If I add my 10 Rand 50 for my day old chick, and I add my 12 Rand for my heating and my labor, my total cost per chicken will be 47 Rand 20. Now, I might have a plan to sell my chicken for perhaps 55 Rand. Now, assuming I'm producing at 47 Rand each, I'm going to be making about 8 Rand per chicken. But as I said to you earlier, you most likely are not going to see a 1.3. I am most likely going to be seeing a 1.8. And that will change my costing quite significantly. So what you need to do is you need to pay attention to your performance. You need to do this calculation to make sure that you don't wind up producing a chicken way beyond your budget purposes, and that you can actually sell it for a profit. Now, if you were to have a lot of food wastage, your food performance would go up. If you had mortalities, your food performance would go up, and all of that would impact on this equation that I'm showing you here. So you need to do this and determine just exactly how much would be acceptable, and try and keep that value as low as possible. Now, fortunately for us, the people that did the research on the broiler farming, they also provided us with the recommended growth curve and feed conversion curve, so that we can compare it to an ideal situation, and we can then know whether or not we're in the limits of acceptable production values or not. Now, what you're going to do every morning is you're going to now come and update your inputs. Now, to do that, I'm going to click on the block called Broiler, and that will open up my data entry screens. And there you can see it says Broiler feed log, and it requires a date, it requires a feed, the number of mortalities, and a mass. In other words, what is your average weight per chicken? If you look on the top right hand corner there, you'll see an icon of a knife and fork. So there we're looking at the feed logs. To the right of that, you'll see a picture of a little shop. And if I click on that, that would be my sales log. So every time I sell a batch of chickens, I'm going to record my sales here. And we need to do that because we need to adjust for quantity changes. Because if we sell 10 chickens today, we're going to have 10 chickens less tomorrow morning, which means the computer has to change the feed calculation to accommodate for that change. You'll see there it asks for the date, how many were sold, how much money came in from the sale, and it also shows me what the average cost per chicken would have been at that point in time. Now, if we look to the right of the shop icon, we'll see the syringe, and if I click on the syringe, so this is the medication screen, and here we're going to record our medication and our vaccines which we give to our batches. So there you can see that we require the date, the name of the treatment, and how much we actually spent on the treatment. Now, we need to do this not just from a costing point of view so that we can know what we're spending on medications and vaccines. We also need to record what exactly we're doing in our flocks. So if you were to see a symptom in your shed, perhaps you're seeing maybe symptoms of Newcastle disease, I would immediately come back to my medication log, and I would check to see whether or not we actually completed the follow-up vaccine on day 10. And if I'm seeing symptoms like that and I don't see a list of the Newcastle infectious bronchitis vaccine, I'm going to immediately do that to try and limit my losses. To the right of that one, if you look at the dollar icon, and I click on the dollar icon, it gives me a balance sheet or a mini balance sheet of that particular flock. So there you'll see it says title Broiler. If you want to change it, you can change it in this screen. It tells me how many I originally bought. It tells me how much I paid for the 100 chicks. It goes to a summary of my feed, how much starter, grow, and finish has gone into this particular flock, and how much the cost came out to be. It tells me what I've been spending on medications, and it tells me what my total investment is. So right now I have 2,685 Rand and 30 cents invested into this flock. So if this flock was to die, that is approximately how much money I stand to lose. Now, going back to my feeding log by clicking on the knife and fork icon. So this is the feed log screen, and we'll be doing this every morning. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the add button to add a new feeding record. And it works very similar to a spreadsheet, so we don't have to enter all the information in at one time. There you can see it's asking for my kilograms of food I gave. I'm not going to worry too much about that. My deaths, I'm going to go and see if I have any mortalities overnight. If you have any, I'm going to enter into that block over there. And I'm going to then also have my mass. So to get the weight of my chickens, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my platform scale, my live chicken crate, and I'm going to put my crate on the scale and I'm going to zero it. I'm going to then fill the crate with maybe 30 chickens. I'll get a total weight for the 30, and then I will divide that total mass by 30 chickens to give me an average weight per chicken. Now let's assume, for example, my average weight here came to 1,250 grams. I'm going to click on the mass block and I'm going to type in 1,250 grams. I'm going to assume I had no mortalities, and I'm not going to worry too much about my feed. Now, all I want to do at this point in time is I want to know whether I'm on the right track. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to click the close button to close my input screen. And you'll see now that it's going to give me my scoreboard again. And when I did that, you'll see my feed performance value changed up to 1.36. So as I said to you, as they become older, the feed performance is going to become worse, and the amount of food that you need per kilo of weight gain is also going to go up. But I'm going to take a look at this, and I'm going to make sure that my feed performance value is in the realms and the limits of what I'm prepared to accept. So at this point in time, I've got my stats. I see there's no major problem. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to proceed to feed them. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a bucket on my platform scale. I'm going to weigh out 12.48 kilograms of grower, and I'm going to put that into my flocks feeders. So now what I need to do is record that I gave 12.48 kilograms of feed. And to do that, I'm going to go back to my input screen by clicking on the batch called Broiler, and I'm going to tell it that I gave 12.48 kilograms of food. I've now completed this, so I'm going to push the down arrow button, and again I'm going to click close to go back to my main screen. Now you'll see my cost per chicken has now gone up to 29 Rand 21 cents, and that's expected because I've just spent money on food. And you'll see my cost per kilo has gone up to 23 Rand and 37 cents per kilogram. And so I can actually now, as I'm feeding every morning, I can see the impact on my costings and on my production. Now, in addition to this, it also offers you a graph button if you look on the left hand side. So if you want to view your production statistics in a graph, you can click on the graph button inside Broiler, and it will now give me a growth chart. And there you can see there's a white line. The white line represents my ideal growth rate. I definitely don't want my red line, which is my current growth rate, to be below that, because that would mean that they are growing too slowly. But at the same time, I don't want my red line to go above the white line, because that would most likely indicate that they're gaining weight too quickly. And as I said to you, slow and steady wins the race. I just want them to be a healthy weight at a weight that I can, at a time that I can sell them. So there you can see my current rate this morning, or my current weight this morning was 1,250 grams. And it tells me my ideal would have been 1,268. So if that were my situation, I would be more than happy with that. Now, as I mentioned to you, the feed performance value is very important. And so there's a graph for that too. And if you want to view that graph, you can click on the menu on the top right-hand corner. So this is the feed conversion curve. And I'm not sure how the feed conversion curve was determined, how it was calculated. What I do find on my flocks, particularly in the first 4 days, their food consumption is not enough to actually finish the ration. And so what I end up doing is I end up putting food on top of food and adding more feeders. And the computer's calculation on feed performance assumes that your food bowl is empty. And so since my food bowl is not empty and the weight gain is not representing that amount of food, your feed conversion generally starts off very high. And so what you're going to find with my flocks is they start off here at 2.6, and then as they begin consuming more and more of their food, my feed conversion starts to come down towards the ideal, and then it will start leveling off, and then it will most likely run slightly higher. As I said to you, I don't have a very professional setup, so I don't expect to get the same performance that the large producers do. But at the same time, I do expect my food performance to come into something profitable. If you do find a situation where you have a problem, so let's say, for example, you change your brand of food to a different brand of food, or perhaps you are losing food somewhere, maybe you've got the wrong type of feeders, perhaps an employee or a staff member is stealing your food, then what you're going to expect to see is you're going to expect to see your food conversion start to climb. If you see your feed conversion start climbing like this, the time to act is when your feed conversion goes up. And you need to find out what the responsible, the offending parameter was that actually caused that feed conversion to go up, so that you can get your feed conversion either to come down slightly or get back under control. Because if this were to carry on up to a 3 to 1 ratio between feed and weight, your probability of making a profit is actually very small. So that's your feed conversion curve. So something else we can do with the feed conversion curve is we can use it to sort of determine whether different markets are profitable. What I mean by that is, and a good example of this would be the baby chicken market. So every 6 months, somebody will come along and say that they have a contract with a food distributor, and they will in fact buy all your chicken as baby chicken at 850 grams. And for that, they'll give you 28 Rand 50 per kilogram. Now, as a farmer, I'm not sure whether or not this would actually be a profitable venture. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my ideal values, and I'm going to then see whether or not this is possible on the ideal. Because if I cannot do it on the ideal, it most likely won't work for me, because I'm going to be slightly higher than the ideal. So as I said, they want 850 grams, and I'm going to go to my growth curve, and I'm going to check to see at what age I can expect to get an 850 gram carcass. Now that would be at 1.1 kilogram live weight, and that would occur just past 3 weeks. Okay, so what they want to do is they want to buy my chickens roughly at that point over there. Now my question comes in, how much would it cost me to produce a baby chicken? And if I sell my baby chicken at, let's say, 1.1 kilograms at 28 Rand 50 per kilo, can I actually make a profit? Now, the first thing I'm going to want to do is I want to determine roughly what my feed conversion would be at that size. Now, if I look at my curve there, my feed performance value would be 1.3. Okay, so as I mentioned to you, the feed performance goes up with time, but ideally I would expect to see 1.3, and in fact I wouldn't do better than a 1.3. And they're going to want to buy a 1.1 kilogram live, and so I'm going to multiply that by 1.1 kilo live, and I'm going to pay 9 Rand 50 per kilo for the food, and so I can then work out just exactly how much it would cost me to raise a baby chicken. So if I go to my calculator over here, a 1.3 feed conversion times a 1.1 live weight times 9 Rand 50, that would give me a total feed cost of about 13 Rand 50. Now again, I need to look at my other costs. I've got a day-old chick cost, and that will be 10 Rand 50. I'm going to have to pay labor. Now in my previous example, I said 6 Rand for a 6-week-old chicken. Now in this case, I'm much better off because I only have to raise them for 3 weeks, meaning I can do 2 batches in 6 weeks, and so I'm going to cut my labor in half. I'm going to work on 3 Rand per chicken for labor. I'm going to also work on my heating. Okay, so my heating will be another 3 Rand because I'm going to work on a half a cycle. And if I now add that up, it will tell me roughly what I can expect to pay for a baby chicken. So if I take the 13 Rand 50 for food, and I add the 10 Rand 50 for day-old chick, and I now add my 6 Rand for heating and labor, that comes to about 30 Rand per chicken. Now, we need to also consider that I need to also pay for a slaughter fee. They want slaughtered chicken. And so they're going to then charge me 2 Rand per chicken for slaughter, and so that will be about 32 Rand per chicken. Now, if I clear my screen, I know that my cost per chicken is going to be 32 Rand. Okay, so I need to get, hopefully, more than 32 Rand for a baby chicken. Okay, so how much can I expect to get back at 28 Rand 50 per kilo slaughtered? Well, my slaughter weight will be 0.85, so 850 grams, and that's being optimistic. And I'm going to multiply that by 28 Rand 50, which is what they're offering me. And that will be the total amount of money I will get back on the carcass sales. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take the 0.85 and I'm going to multiply it by 28 Rand 50. And that gives me a yield of 24 Rand 22 cents. Okay, so that's how much money I can expect to recover on the carcass. My cost per chicken is going to be about 32 Rand. Now, obviously, your costs might be different. You can enter them. Maybe it's viable for you. I'm not sure. Now, obviously, that's just the carcass. So we still have a head. We still have the feet. We still have the gizzard. We still have the intestines. And we still have the livers. The problem I have now is I would need to get about 8 Rand. So with this other material, I would need to somehow recover 8 Rand just to be able to break even on my transaction. Would I be able to do that with that? I'm not so sure, because the large producers generally give the stuff at a very, very competitive rate. So you're not going to be able to charge what you want for them, and it's a very small market as well. On top of that, that would be my break even. So what I would need to do now is I would need to somehow find value in the rest of that chicken in order to actually make a profit. So if I was to make a Rand on top of that, and I did 1,000 chickens, my return would only be 1,000 Rand. Would this be a viable market for me? For me personally, no. Now, from a advantage point of view, the market looks good because my infrastructure is a lot less. I can do 2,000 chickens in a cycle, whereas with the 6 week I can only do half as much. In addition to that, I'm getting a paycheck every 3 weeks as opposed to every 6 weeks. But when I do my numbers like this, it doesn't appear that I'm actually coming out on top. And so what you're going to find happens quite often is the person that offers you the contract will most likely withdraw it and disappear, and in 6 months somebody else will come along with a different angle on the market to try and make it profitable. And so what they would then do is they would then say to you that don't worry about the slaughter fee, and your cost would then be 30 Rand. But then what we do is we've got an agreement with the people doing the slaughtering that they will take your head, your feet, your gizzard, your intestines, and your livers. In which case you absolutely cannot make money. I've seen different business models on this, but I have yet to see anybody come up with a business model that can actually make a profit. Because really the problem that you have here is that you should be increasing your price to the farmer, not trying to cut costs elsewhere. So that is your feed conversion curve. And as I say to you, we can use this to do a lot of problem solving. So if you were to see your feed conversion go up, but your growth rate is normal on your growth curve, I would expect that I'm having sufficient growth, but I'm using more food than I need. Right? So it could be wastage, it could be shrinkage. If on the other hand my growth rate comes down, so maybe my chickens are growing slower, but my feed conversion is looking good, it could be that I'm not feeding enough. So in other words, what they are eating, they are converting efficiently. They just aren't converting enough of it. So what you can do is you can visit these graphs every morning and you can see just exactly how you're doing over time. So if I click the close button over there, you'll see it takes me back to the main screen again. And I've covered most aspects of this. The one I want to cover now is the actual sales of your live chickens. And I want to show you why you should be selling per kilogram and not per unit. Now, as you can see there, my cost is 29.21 per chicken. Now, if someone came to me and said to me that they will buy all my chickens at 29.21 cost, that would definitely be possible, that you can do a unit cost. But if you're like me and you are selling your chickens piecemeal, where you're selling maybe 5 or 10 per transaction, and your sales can probably go over a week, then I strongly suggest that you sell by the kilogram. And I'm going to show you why. So if we take a look at our flock and we consider the flock as being a shed, and I was to divide my flock into different categories. So I'm going to partition it off and I'm going to subgroup them. Now, let's say, for example, the first group would be any chicken weighing 1.6, the next one 1.7, the next one 1.8, the next one 1.9, etc. And that will go up to, let's say, 3 kilograms. If I was to count the number of chickens in each one of those batches, then what you're going to find is the majority of your chickens are going to fall in this middle group, which is also going to be what your average weight was when you weighed off your 30 chickens. Now, as you can see there, my cost per kilo is 23 Rand 37, and my chicken in that group weighs 1.9. Now, if they were to take chickens in the average group, in the middle group, and I was to work on a cost per chicken of 29 Rand 21 and I sold per unit, that would be fine. On the other hand, if I was to allow them to take a 3 kilogram chicken, that would be fine, provided that they take a chicken of equal smallness. So for example, they took a 1.6. But in my experience, they don't want a small chicken, they only want to take the big chickens. Now, what would typically happen is they would come out to my shed and they would say to me, what is your stock price? And I would then go along and I would say, well, if my cost per chicken is 29 Rand, I'm going to then sell my chicken at a stock price of 50 Rand. Your problem comes in now. Your live seller is going to want to come in and he's going to want to choose his chicken, and he's going to be taking chickens in that group over there, which is 3 kilograms, and I'm going to sell them to him at 50 Rand stock price. Now I'm going to show you I'm actually making a loss on that. So if I do the calculation and I say that my cost per kilogram is 23 Rand and 37 cents per kilogram, and my chicken weighs 3 kilograms, then the total cost on that chicken that he bought for 3 kilograms would be 23 Rand and 37 cents, and I'm going to multiply that by the live weight of 3 Rand. My cost on that chicken is going to be 70 Rand, and I sold it to him for a stock price of 50 Rand. So by selling per chicken on a stock price, I actually made a 20 Rand loss for every chicken that he bought. So that is a very bad idea and a very bad system. So what I'm going to suggest you do is that you work out your sales price per kilogram. So in this case over here, I'm going to look at my cost per kilo as being 23 Rand and 37, and I'm going to then say that I'm going to sell my chicken at 30 Rand per kilogram. Now, if I do that, I can expect to make about 7 Rand per kilogram, right? So on a 2 kilogram chicken, I can expect to make about 14 Rand, right? So that would be acceptable. Now, as you can see here, it bypasses that problem with the stock price system, is because if the person takes a 2 kilogram chicken, he's going to pay me 60 Rand. Alright, so if I work on that, I've got a 60 Rand chicken, and that will be for a 2 kilogram chicken. If the person comes and selects my 3 kilogram chickens, he's welcome to do that too. That will just be 90 Rand, and that will be for a 3 kilogram chicken. And so I don't have these losses. And so what we do is we will go with our live seller to the poultry house. We will put a live chicken crate on the scale. We will program the scale at 30 Rand a kilogram, and we will then put, probably depending on the size of the chicken, between 8 and 10 chickens, and we will then get a total weight for the crate. And whatever that weight is times 30 Rand is what they pay me. So if they're going to be selecting very large chickens, they're going to pay me slightly more. If they take smaller chickens, they're going to be paying me slightly less. So that's just a bit of advice on the sales calculation. Then finally, the last section would be how we record our sales. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to click on the batch called Broiler. That will open up my data input screens. I'm going to go to that screen with the storefront, and this is where I'm going to record my transactions. So I'm going to click add. So for example, if we put a crate on the scale, I'm going to click add. There you'll see it records today's date as being the 27th of April. And I'm going to record exactly how many chickens were in the crate. So let's assume I had 10. And what value did you have? My scale will then take the total weight. It will multiply it by the 30 Rand per kilo I gave it. And let's say, for example, it tells me that my total here would be 65 Rand a chicken. So let's call it 650 Rand for the crate. And I will then minimize my keyboard, and you'll see it automatically fills in my average cost at 26 Rand 51. So that was my cost before they gave the food, because my assumption is that they haven't yet eaten today's food. If we want to do another crate, maybe he wants to buy 20. Again, I'll click add. I will then click quantity 10. And maybe, for example, they select slightly more heavy chickens. And so this one would be 720 Rand. And again, I'll minimize my keyboard, and it shows me my cost is 26 Rand 51. So if I now click close, you can see there that my quantities have now been reduced to 76 because they've been sold. And up until today, I have effectively sold 20% of my original flock. Now going back into my data entry screen, if I click on the dollar icon and I go back to my balance sheet, you will see there that there's now a sales figure of a total sales figure of 1,370. That's how much money I've actually got back in on the flock. And so if I take the 2,803 Rand I've invested, and I take off the 1,370 Rand that I've got back on sales, currently I am still 1,433 Rand in the red. So if I was to lose all my chickens right now, that is how much money I would plan on losing. And I would suggest you look at these numbers quite closely, because one of the first things I learned when I did this is that up until about, I can't remember exactly, but I think it was 65% of my flock effectively got me to a break-even point. My profit was actually the remaining 20 or 30%. So where you think your profit margins on broiler farming is actually very high, I think you're actually walking a very, very fine line between profit and loss. So you need to manage your performance very, very carefully, and your mortalities very, very carefully. Just one more thing I'm going to show you. If I click close and go back to the main screen, you can see that my food ration has also changed. So my food ration has now gone down to 9.88 kilograms of grower, because I'm now feeding a lot fewer chickens than I was this morning. And that is approximately the entirety of the app and how the management happens. I would suggest you take a look at this. I hope it can help somebody, and good luck with your farming.